What if I told you that the reason why many aspiring school leaders don't get hired has nothing to do with their experience, their degrees, or even their answers? It has everything to do with what they're preparing for. Most candidates spend hours memorizing responses to interview questions, but the candidates who get the offer prepare something completely different. If you're getting ready for your first assistant principal, supervisor, or leadership role, this episode might completely change the way you prepare. Let's talk about it. What's going on, aspiring school leader? I am Dr. Donovan Smalls II, assistant principal, best-selling author, interview coach, and I help aspiring school leaders get interview ready and confidently land their first leadership role. Now, welcome back to the podcast. I am extremely excited about this episode. I took some time off to replenish, recharge, and remember to finish out the school year because I am also an assistant principal. I am not someone who is speaking from a place of this is what I did in the past. I am actively involved in helping to lead a school. And so I'm giving you practical experiences. I'm giving you real life examples. I'm giving you real time examples and observations and things that I have experienced and gone through being on interview committees, right? Interviewing potential candidates, being in the room where these conversations are being had. And so it was great to actually take some time out to finish out the school year strong so that I have practical material to share with you. I know you're enjoying this episode, but I want to let you know about my 4-week interview preparation coaching program called Elevate Your Impact. This program is specifically for aspiring school leaders who have an amazing resume. You're ready to lead, but you may need additional support regarding interview preparation. In my 4-week program, you will learn how to clarify and confidently communicate your leadership story, practice scenario-based interview questions with real-time coaching and targeted feedback, and participate in a full one-on-one mock leadership interview with targeted, actionable feedback. So if that's you, if you're an aspiring school leader and you know you need additional support regarding interview preparation, visit my website, donovansmalls2.com/coaching for more information, or click the link in the description to book your call with me today. So today's topic, we're talking about something that I think is extremely important when it comes to interview preparation. You're preparing for the wrong interview. That's the title of today's session. It's you're preparing for the wrong interview. Now, when it comes to interview preparation, many times we sit down and we Google, okay, so what are some top assistant principal interview questions? How can I respond to these specific questions? Or nowadays, we're even using ChatGPT to get the responses that we think that are going to be beneficial for hiring committees to eventually give us that offer. I think all of those things are practical. All of those things are true. And maybe you should even be doing those things. However, I don't want you to get into this routine of rehearsing and memorizing to the point where you sound like a robot. I will never forget, I was in an interview and there were about 8 of us sitting on a panel and we're getting questions from the superintendent and also a bunch of individuals who are helping to lead the schools within their district. And every time that this one person continued to get questions, they literally would read from a piece of paper their responses. And I'm thinking to myself, maybe this is a good strategy. I wouldn't necessarily do that or recommend that because you can start to sound robotic in how you are answering questions. And here's the thing. The hiring committee is not necessarily concerned about how you answer questions. They're concerned about, or they're listening for, are you the type of leader that can actually lead this school? Because guess what? When there are situations and circumstances that come up in your school and you're an assistant principal, you don't have time to read a paper, to read the protocol, to read the code of conduct, right? You have to be able to have the leadership competency, the leadership understanding, the leadership lens to be able to make decisions on the fly that align with the mission, the vision, the core values of your principal, of the district, right? You have to be a leader. And leaders are not necessarily rehearsing answers and responses. They have enough lived experiences, which we'll get into, to demonstrate that they are the right person for the job. So today I want to walk you through 3 shifts that will completely change how you prepare for your next interview. Shift number 1 is that I want you to shift from memorizing answers to collecting evidence, because evidence beats memorization every time. What this means is stop scripting perfect responses. Now, I know, again, like we want to anticipate what the hiring committee is going to ask us and what they want to hear, which is fine. But you need a framework to be able to answer questions as opposed to scripting things that you think are going to be a perfect response. And that's what I help aspiring school leaders do in my Elevate Your Impact coaching program. We actually go through these questions, scenario-based questions, evidence-based questions, right? So that you are getting a comprehensive understanding of how to answer questions, not necessarily rehearsing step by step. This is what the hiring committee wants to hear, because honestly, you don't know exactly what the hiring committee wants to hear. But what you do know is that there's a framework, there's a level of leadership that you must be able to demonstrate if you're going to land that job. What this also means in terms of shifting from memorizing answers to collecting evidence is that you stop trying to sound right, that you start gathering real leadership moments, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a team leader, whether you're an academic coach, whatever your role is. What evidence can you collect right now to be able to demonstrate that you are ready for that next step in your career? So you're going to be using actual experiences as proof of leadership. Again, anybody can rehearse their responses. Anybody can give us a textbook answer to culturally responsive teaching, to what is equity, to how do you manage a classroom, to how are you coaching and developing teachers. That's all great. Yet at the same time, how are you going to demonstrate that you've either already done these things or that you have a level of competency to be able to do these things if you haven't done them already? So a weak answer would be, I believe in collaboration and communication, right? You don't want to say those type of things in your interview. And if you do, you want to be able to frame that with an actual example of how you collaborate and how you communicate. Of course, everybody believes in collaboration and communication, especially in education. And if you don't, then we have another thing to talk about, right? But you truly want to give real situations, real examples of what you have done, specific conflict examples, right? Your actions that you've taken clearly outlined, because it allows the hiring committee to see your train of thought. And also, if you have measurable or observable outcomes, you want to include that as well. And here's a thing that I want you to also consider, right? When we think about measurable outcomes and measurable results, sometimes those can be quantitative results, right? Like you've increased student achievement by, a certain percentage, right? That sounds great. But I don't want you to necessarily pigeonhole yourself into thinking about measurable outcomes, specifically when it comes to quantitative data, because you can also give qualitative data in terms of how you've increased student achievement in a particular way that has nothing to do with numbers, right? And so quantitative data has to deal with numbers. Qualitative data has to deal with how you've increased culture and climate within your school building, right? How you've led, how you coach and develop a teacher, a first-year teacher, so that they improved their practice. You can draw on both quantitative and qualitative data to demonstrate the measurable outcomes that you have been able to achieve as a future school leader, right? So I want you to think about that. I want you to, again, number 1, shift from memorizing your answers to actually collecting evidence to demonstrate that you are ready for school leadership. Number 2, I want you to shift from preparing answers to preparing stories, right? Because we know that stories captivate people, right? We know that typically that first question in an interview is, tell us a little bit about yourself. And that's something that you want to be able to nail. You want to be able to demonstrate how you have come to this particular point in time as a school leader that isn't just rambling about your life story, but is actually connected to something that people can grab onto, something that is inspirational, something that translates to you being a leader that's going to coach and develop teachers, to you being a leader that's going to be able to improve student achievement, to connect with students as well, right? So all of those stories, because we all have them, of a time that we did increase student achievement, of a time that we did improve culture and climate, as of a time that we needed to adjust our classroom management strategies, right? All of those things are truly important. And the stories that you come up with should relate to multiple scenarios and situations. So for example, if you get a question about, there's a student or a teacher is sending a student to the main office and you think that this particular student needs to remain in class because of the infraction, and the infraction doesn't necessarily match the consequence of sending a student to the main office, how would you handle that situation and scenario? You can pull from a story where you've either done that in the past and you've learned that that's not the actual approach and how you need to approach things in the future, or you can talk about how, as an academic coach, what you've learned is that sending a student to the main office is not actually what we need to do. We need to be able to research and spend time with the student to understand the underlying reason as to why they were acting out in this particular way and how you would rectify that as a school leader in the future. See, you need to be able to have a bank of stories, practical, real life, tangible stories that demonstrate your leadership capability, right? And these stories could surround leadership questions. They could also deal with data-driven decision-making or collaboration or change management or even communication, right? The key here is to make sure that your stories are not things that you are just rambling with, but that you can connect those stories to how good of a leader that you are going to be for this particular school, right? So again, number 2 is shift from preparing answers to preparing stories. And lastly, I want you to shift from impressing the committee to building trust. See, anybody can be impressive in an interview, right? Interviewing is actually an art. So regardless of how great of a leader you are, when you get to that interview, you have to be able to articulate that in a way that is transferable, in a way that people can forecast who you're going to be if we offer you the job. And how you do that is understanding that the trust that you need to build in this interview clearly is going to outweigh and beat performance. How can you develop trust in your interview so that you're the one? Because here's the thing. You are going to be, although you're not the primary leader in your school, right? Because the primary leader will be your principal. The primary leader will be your director. The primary leader, you're going to have somebody that you report to. Yet at the same time, you as an AP, you as whatever your role is going to be, you're going to at some time be responsible for making a building-wide decision on behalf of your principal. And so your principal is going to have to trust that you have a leadership level of understanding. You have a growth mindset that you need to be able to make decisions on behalf of other people that don't harm the school community. And so it's all about trust. And how you demonstrate trust is understanding what your role is as an AP, which is to make sure that you are making decisions that are in alignment with your principal. That's key. That's one of the primary things that people don't understand is that, yeah, you're not just a manager of the building. You are a leader, and you have to demonstrate that, and people have to trust that they can ultimately at some point, right? Because you never know the dynamics if somebody's absent. At some point, you're going to be given the keys to help lead this or to run this building. And can people trust that you will be able to do that? So in your interview, I want you to stop trying to sound like an administrator. Stop overusing educational jargon. Stop performing, stop the performative leadership, right? Like you just want to be seen. You just want this particular role because you feel like it's going to enhance your lifestyle, right? And maybe it will, but that's not the underlying reason as to why you want to be a leader. I want you to focus on clarity, honesty, and reflection. Nobody is perfect, and you don't want to portray that you're trying to be perfect or that you are this perfect leader in your interview. People want to hear a level of accountability, a level of self-reflection, a level of, okay, I made a mistake here, but I was able to correct it. A level of confidence, but also humility, right? There's a balance there that you must be able to demonstrate. So again, number 3 is we're shifting from impressing the committee to building trust. Today, we talked about 3 shifts that will completely change how you prepare for your next interview. Number 1 was shift from memorizing answers to collecting evidence. Number 2, shift from preparing answers to preparing stories. And lastly, shift from impressing the committee to building trust. Now, if you're someone who, listen, you went through interview season, at this point, you are coming to the realization that you're going to be in your previous role in terms of being a teacher, academic coach, whatever the case is, but you know that you need interview preparation, you need to be coached, you need someone to bounce ideas off of, you need someone who is actually in the field, right? Actually an assistant principal to giving you real life examples of how to answer these questions and how to go about, what you're going to step into as a leader. Reach out, let's have a conversation, because I also help people with interview preparation. I also coach people when it comes to developing your leadership story, right? Gathering these concrete examples and stories so that you can clearly articulate and build trust of evidence that you have done so that you can articulate that clearly in your interview. It's not enough for you to be a great leader. It's not enough for you to have degrees. You have to be able to articulate that in your interview, and that sometimes causes people to stumble. And so if that's you, if you know that you need interview preparation, if you know that you need coaching, let's have that conversation. Let's get you to exactly where you want to be so that you can confidently land your first school leadership role. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to share it with someone else so that we can continue to impact aspiring leaders and help them to become confident in their interviews. As always, I hope you have a great week of teaching, leading, and learning. Take care.